All right, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Bill Hargenrader, best-selling author of Mars Journey Call to Action and online community ambassador for the Mars Society. I'm here today with an awesome guest, a fellow author, Leonard David. Leonard, welcome to the show.
Be here. I really
Awesome.
appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to read your bio real quick, and then we'll get into some of your personal journey and your upcoming book based on the Mars National Geographic series, the companion book for that. And so Leonard David is an award-winning space journalist who has been reporting on space activities for over 50 years. He frequently contributes to the website space.com and their Space Insider columnist, and is the co-author of Buzz Aldrin's Mission to Mars. In 2015, he became the first recipient of the American Astronautical Society's Ordway Award for Sustained Excellence in Spaceflight History in the category of journalism, and in 2010, he received the National Space Press Club Award. Great stuff. So we're going to get to your book in a little bit, but first, can you tell us more about what your personal journey is? Like, how did you get started, interested in space, and what brought you up into being able to actually author this book, the Mars book?
Well, you know, for a long, long time, I've been interested in space exploration, and I'm old enough. There wasn't any. We're talking sounding rockets and V-2 rockets in White Sands, New Mexico, taking off. And I lived in Texas at the time, and I actually had a little newspaper that I hand wrote for the neighbors and sold it for a nickel, 25 cents, but it sounds right to say a nickel. So I kind of got captivated with early rocket experiments that were, and then when Sputnik was launched, I actually saw Sputnik, or at least the rocket that had put it up. People tell me you couldn't have seen Sputnik, but so whatever, it was the first time you could see, you know, a human-made object going through the night sky. Of course, that was the time of the Cold War, and U.S. and Russia, Soviet Union was in the bright dot that went across the sky. Was it a bomb that was going to come out, or what was it? So when the Sputnik was launched and then the whole space exploration, space race began, I really, this is what I'm interested in, and started writing more and more. And little by little over the years, I was able to do some freelance articles in different publications.
Gotcha. And so this takes us up until, so what were some of your inspirations in addition to, you know, the real science was going on? Were you an avid sci-fi reader? Any scientists that you followed? Anything of that nature?
My science fiction, I was not a big book reader of sci-fi, but certainly in the 50s, the movies were Moon and Forbidden Planet and all these early, which I had bought them all, and to go back and look at what intrigued me in those, and it's a great romp to go back in history. Captivated with those films, and then certainly it was Tomorrowland. It was Walt Disney. It was the beginnings of his show. They had special segments on that they called Tomorrowland, and some of those were humans in space going to Mars, and so all those just fed into my hunger to keep track of the space program. And meanwhile, you know, the space program was taking shape. Things were blowing up. Dogs were going into orbit. You know, Mercury capsules were being built. The 7 astronauts were picked to be the first passengers for America's space program. So, you know, it just, all of a sudden, it just seemed to gel. And so let's ride the comet.
Yeah. And so what about now with the uptick in Mars awareness? We're seeing Mars kind of go mainstream, the Martian movie that came out. Do you see any similarities in between now and how it was back then when you were starting to get inspired?
Well, I think, you know, you had to, some people watch The Martian, and it's done so well, and it's so accurate in a lot of ways. They think they must have filmed it on location. So back when I was looking at sci-fi, I knew that wasn't happening. But nowadays, I think certainly The Martian, and there's quite a number of other films that kind of make it look all the more real, and people are getting I think, acclimated to the hardware, the go of mission control, talking to people in distant locations. So it's all part of a culture awareness that this is, now we have even grander expectations of how this is going to play out.
Yeah. And now we have the National Geographic Channel series Mars, 6-part television series, part documentary, part fiction. When did you first hear about that series? And were you brought in the beginning, or did you raise your hand and say, this is something I'm interested in? How did that go down?
Well, let's see if I remember right. It's been a real quick burst of energy on National Geographic's part. I was actually in Planetary Institute in Houston, out of all things, a human landing site on Mars program. I mean, they brought in hundreds of scientists, came in and started talking about their best to put a human crew on the planet. And I kind of got a call saying, would you be interested in this book idea? So it's been a real, and then I started tapping into the production people, and we kind of colluded early on with themes that were that they might want to look at, and also people that they would interview. So I kind of got an early take of where they were going. Then I had my assignment was to try to figure out where I was going in the book. And I have a lot of things to say because I've written about Mars quite a bit, and there's a lot of loose ends that you need to suggest we've got some solutions, or we still got problems. Yeah. So it was a nice a blend of TV people in the book, and we're all looking forward to the public reaction to the book and the TV series.
Yeah, yeah. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about the book and describe what so we have a little bit of information, or we've seen the trailers, or if you haven't seen the trailers for the Mars series, check them out. Pretty nice way there, like I said, blending the documentary style with setting the story in the future. How does your book, how does that tie into that, and where does it differ?
Well, because I have not seen myself the entire collection of the final product. I think they're actually still post-production, putting in sound effects and some other things. So haven't seen that, but I will say, in writing this book, I had to look at myself and say, God, this is really going to be hard. And then you get a new paper from somebody that had a solution to something. That kind of makes sense. I guess we could get away with that. And so I learned a lot of the technical side, but what I really wanted to stress was this is not just putting people in a can on Mars and shoving them in there and saying good luck and we'll be back to you at some point. It was really more of the cultural impact of humans on Mars, and also the anthropological side. There's also the the physical problems you've got getting to the planet, and then once you're there, coping with the less gravity and the radiation and all these other things. And then you start somewhere about halfway into the book, we certainly started getting into international activities. Yeah. We also started getting more into terraforming, what would be the long-range plan beyond some people just container on Mars. What was the possibilities there? So that's in the book, and I'm real proud of a couple of areas that I really tried to emphasize, because I think there's some big question marks. Ethics, forming, and some other things that are going to be very interesting as we have more and more people on the planet.
Yeah. What are some of those points on ethics? Because I think that's always one of the big questions that comes up: is do we carry on, whatever government lands? If it's international, they land. If it's a corporation, they land. What type of system for governance is? When do you put governance into play at what certain population points? So what are some of your thoughts on that?
I'm not going to tell you. You got a book.
Okay, we got to wait around a little bit. It's a big book. I'm sure. Well,
it's heavy. I got one. what I tried to do, the ethics side was something that kept being brought up by several people I interviewed. And it was the go, no go, that if we find life on Mars, which, you know, I'm a believer that it's there. We'll get to it. If it's there, are we talking about second genesis? Is this kind of sputum from Earth that landed on Mars and, you know, planet, or vice versa, Mars life came to Earth? And wouldn't that be ironic to be going back to our home planet? Mm. So that ethics thing is, you know, if life's there, how far do we go on transforming the planet? And it's kind of a catch-22, because on one side of the exploration picture, you want the search for life to be something very exciting, and how do we do that without disrupting it somehow? There were a number of people that brought up ethics of exploration, and so that's somewhat in the book in chapters.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty big. Obviously, it'd be exciting to find life. If there was life there before, from what we discovered with a stream of files on Earth, it most likely is still there. Yep. But yeah, we're crossing that bridge. As you know, basically, you see a lot of sci-fi shows where, you know, aliens come to Earth and then start mining it for resources, not caring what the humans think. And it's almost like if we go to Mars and start doing that, we're almost like the bad guys in the sci-fi series. So you can start playing kind of mental games of that both ways. But either way, I'm all for us pushing the envelope, getting there and discovering it. And I think it's going to take, you know, people on the ground to help make those discoveries versus sending a rover every few years, you know, with slightly better instrumentation. I think it's going to be people on the ground that are actually helping to make that happen faster and making decisions on that. So yeah,
the life question is so alive and well about Mars, and here we've spent really I tried to do this, and I didn't come up with probably the right number, but we've certainly spent billions and billions. I wouldn't doubt if it's been $1 trillion. You know, at some point, of all the money spent by multiple countries to explore Mars, and you know, here we were in 1976 with the audacity to put in a little experiment, landed a Viking spacecraft. That was their duty. Is there life on Mars? Give me an answer. And I explored that a little bit about what came out of that. But here we are, all these decades later.
Yeah. Yeah. So we I wanted to touch base with you. We're recording this in early October. We're going to air the day your book comes out, October 25th. So just last week, or in the past, I guess almost 2 weeks at this point, Elon Musk at the IAC came out with his presentation on his plan. And I know you've reported on some people's reviews, and we actually just did a podcast with Dr. Zuber giving his review and critique. Well, do you want to share some of your thoughts on his plan? Are you excited about it? Do you think it's realistic? What do you think?
I go back, because I'm older now, but I almost go back to Tomorrowland and watching Walt Disney. I think Elon serves a real in getting the public again acclimated to this is no longer a dream, but you need dream machines that he wants to build to get to Mars. So you know, everybody I've talked to, Buzz Aldrin, to I don't know, lots of different people. I've read a lot of reports critiquing his vision. It's certainly exciting, but details need to follow. And you know, you get into private ships to create the financial wherewithal to pull that off. We'll see. So is certainly a first-class dreamer, and has technology to boot to show that he can pull off, whether it's Tesla or solar cities or whatever, anything. I think it helped the public, you know, once again, kind of get ready for Mars. It's coming. It's in your future, or certain generations of us are going to be there. To the good.
Yeah. And so you've been obviously doing space journalism. Well, I'm working on the craft for a long time now. What are some of your more memorable stories or events that you maybe like one or two of the most memorable ones that you in your career that you've reported on? I'm curious.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I have to think. I've really been fortunate to be a journalist at a period of time where I kind of grew into, writing it on little scraps of paper for the neighborhood to other publications. But to probably the first shuttle launch,
Yeah.
and seeing that go, because I'm always paranoid about these one-time events where you have people on board that have never flown before, and it was pretty heart-throbbing to see that thing finally take off. And that was the only landing I think I've seen. We flew out to Edwards and saw Columbia come back in, and you couldn't help but get us really excited that, as I think John Young and Crippen said when they climbed out of the the future has arrived. And so we're all out there applauding in the desert, and it was just spectacular. I've done in the past where I'm going, is that supposed to happen? Spaceship One, when it was trying to win the Ansari X Prize, Melville as the pilot got out of control at a high altitude. And I'm thinking, boy, this is not going to look good. But again, that's why he was in there. Melville's an extremely good pilot, so he was able to wrestle it.
Yeah.
Shape. But that was pretty heartthrobber. Also, I was in the Space Telescope Science Institute when it, after was there for the Hubble telescope, and these kludge ideas about how to fix it, and they came up with the CoStar, this kind of mirror system inside the telescope, and to focus it. And I was there the night the doors burst open and I got the first picture from a really clear Hubble telescope, and that was pretty exciting. There's some ran in. Heidi Hamill, if I remember right, ran in with a champagne bottle. And we're in business.
Awesome. Yeah. No, those are some great times. Obviously, there's some tough times to go through, but one of the questions we ask ourselves as a society is what price is too great for space exploration and human progress. And what are your thoughts on those people that might want to go to Mars on a one-way mission? Risk is high, but they want to set up a colony. What are your thoughts on their individual right to choose to make that decision versus not being allowed? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, let me go back a little bit and talk about one other incident that's just always frozen in my mind, which was covering the Columbia accident.
Okay, yeah.
And told yet about what really transpired there, but that's probably some other book, maybe by me, maybe by somebody else. But there's a lot there. But it gets to risk. It gets to the attention to detail, and even when you do that, things can go wrong. So yeah, one-way trips to Mars are interesting. I kind of lightly touched on it because I'm not a big fan of the one-way trips. At some point, there will be some, hardened capability on the planet where one-way trips make sense because you've got an infrastructure there to live. So initially, this transport back and forth, how do we do that economically, and how do we make that routine? And I think you're back to some of the questions about how do you tame Mars to make it more habitable, make it more livable. So are going to be just that. It's going to be a hard row. And even writing the book, like I said, there are times when I'm going, I don't know, can this really happen over again? So we're not going to go through a the flags and footprint scenario for Apollo. Of we went, we conquered, we put the flag up, we saluted, we got some rocks, we're back home.
Yeah.
That's not what this adventure is about. So And whether it's a global adventure, a private adventure, it's whatever it's going to turn out to be, it's in the cards. And I'm just hoping that we even see Elon do some of his Dragon flights coming up to Mars, and at least get some of his capability on the surface.
Yeah. No, I'm looking at actually a placard here for your book. Ron Howard wrote the foreword for your book, and he actually is what, the producer, executive producer, Brian Grazer, Ron Howard. Did you get to work with him or talk with him at all?
Well, not really. I talked to some of the producers involved. In New York, we're all supposedly going to meet and say, how'd we all do? But he wrote a really nice foreword. It's pretty passionate, and I think he probably in the same kind of age I am, and he recalls so much of the space program, but his heart's there. You can tell it in the words he's written in the foreword. That Ron Howard a long time ago, actually, when he was making Apollo 13.
Apollo 13, yeah.
I never forget the time. We went on for quite a while, and I'm thinking, God, I gotta let this guy go, because he's still working on the film. And all of a sudden he goes, "Hey, I gotta go now. We're going to be putting in the sound of ocean of Apollo of the command module for Apollo 13, and we got to get that down today." And I said, "Wait a minute, no sound in space." And he goes, "It's the movies."
There you go. Nice.
And we had a nice chat. I'm looking forward to meeting him again.
Yeah.
In person.
So yeah. So this has been great. We're gonna wrap the interview up in a little bit, but I want to give you an open mic of sorts. We'll finish with talking about where people can find the book. But anything you want to share with our audience about your life in general, space exploration, your family? Open mic time.
Yeah. Well, it's been a real interesting career so far, and I'm looking forward to getting this book out. And it's almost an out-of-body experience when you do these kind of things. When a book comes out, you write it, you work on it so hard. A big lull period while you're waiting for everybody to get their hands on it, and then you're waiting for the reviews, and you're waiting for comments, and so I'm looking forward to that. Barbara, my wife, had to put up with me on Mars for quite many months. It was the survival line there for a lot of it. But I think you get a little anxious about getting in there. There's a lot that was left on the floor when we got down to the final edits. I probably have enough for another book, actually, but beyond that, it's just, I think I'm looking forward to the comments from people, and we're going to go on a little book tour around the country, and I'm kind of anxious to hear what people think about in general, and then this target Mars. So that I'll learn a lot. I learned a lot with Buzz Aldrin going around the country. That's a special case because he's actually been off planet. I've been off planet in my mind for decades, but
yeah.
Trip. But going around with Buzz, the aspect is really high. Aficionados are definitely out there. They're wondering what happened to our space program. I hope this book helps address a little bit of that. And let's get back on track.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And actually, Buzz Aldrin, a little tie-in, was just recently last week at the Mars City Design Challenge finals. It's a global contest where basically people design technology that will be used on Mars that we can use today. One of my teams, Mars Now Galactic Farms, actually won the agriculture category, but Buzz Aldrin came to speak, and he pretty much closed the building down that we were in. He was giving it, in his 90s, 90 years old. He comes up, just got back from the IAC Guadalajara, and he's just going on and on and on. They're literally like blinking the lights, like, we're closing the building down. Buzz was like, okay, one more minute. We're closing the building. Yeah. Okay, one more minute. I got some more to give you. So it was an amazing experience.
That's Buzz, and I tell you, I'm getting to know him over we've known each other a long time, but going on the tour was great, and has ever returned to Earth. I mean, he's still a cycling spaceship around the planet. I mean, he every time, and you know, for his age and also his spontaneity to be creative. I mean, it's amazing. I just talked to him yesterday and a couple days ago. He's got new ideas.
Yeah. Well, all right, everybody listening or watching, depending on you're viewing this, check out Mars, Our Future on the Red Planet. We're gonna put this, like I said, it's coming out October 25th. So go where books are sold, look for it, ask for it. Leonard, this has been a really great time. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Everybody else out there, if you enjoyed this, please do give a thumbs up and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next show. All right, thanks all. Take care. Bye.